Welcome to the Pedal Collaborative podcast. We're so glad you're here. Hey, how's it going? And welcome to episode 2 of the Pedal Collaborative podcast.
Yes, welcome back. This week, we will be talking compressors and all things at the beginning of your signal chain.
All things squishy.
Yeah, all things squishy. That works. So, we were kind of preparing for the podcast as well as this episode. We were talking through a bit of the way we both relate to gear, which we talked a bit on the first episode about.
Right.
And
we talk about that all the time.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. But what I found kind of fun and amusing about this particular episode and pedal type is I have had the same one since 2013, I believe. I found what I liked and I stayed with it. I did get it updated, but and how many compressors have you owned in your lifetime?
I mean, I don't think there's a number that we can't count that high. No. Honestly, actually, compressors is probably one of those things that I have not really gone down the bunny trail that much. I know what kind of compressor I like, and so I've tried a lot of different variations. So I've probably tried, off the top of my head, maybe a dozen or so of a specific there's a certain thing I want in a compressor, and if it doesn't have that certain thing, which we can talk about in a bit, I don't even bother with it. But of the compressors that have that certain thing, probably about a dozen.
A dozen, yeah. So I guess we should probably first talk a little bit about what compression is, because as we know, we kind of talked about this channel, it's a little educational.
Yeah.
So do you want to tackle that while I also pull up the two that I've owned, and then we can talk about it?
Sure, that sounds good. So when we think about compression, one great way to think about that is volume. And okay, that may not be the most scientific, but let's hang with me for a sec. As a guitar player, or even, a synth player, whatever the case is, you know that the incoming volume is not consistent. Sometimes you play softer, sometimes you play louder. And if you look at those waveforms, they're kind of really small when it comes to the softer playing times, and like really big when it comes to the louder moments. But what a compressor does is it takes the louder and kind of squishes them down, while also allowing to bring the whole volume up, right? So it basically says, all right, so you're the biggest moments that you're bringing in and all of that volume, let's take that down, maybe 15%, maybe 20%, whatever the case is. But let's raise the entire thing to be at that level. So that means then, like, all of your softer moments, they can be louder, but still consistent with the overall volume of even the harder things, right? So like, if you think of it, to me, it's kind of reversed. I think about how loud do I make the soft notes that I play. And then as I dig into something more, the harder I'm playing, the louder I'm playing, those start to get compressed, and I'm not getting necessarily as much of the pick dynamics or the feel that I would get without one, but the volume's consistent.
That was a pretty perfect description. It's funny because I now understand all that, but when I first got a compressor, all I wanted to do was make the high G, B, and E string on my Strat sound as loud as the top of it. And that's what
sure.
I understood it as. It was like, I just need these strings to sound as loud as the other ones. Your description just now exemplifies that. But for a long time, because early guitar playing, I just was like, a compressor is something that makes my guitar equalize everything, basically, which is what you just said with more detail. It's funny now that I have gotten into sound and audio production as well as synthesizers. I use compressors for everything, and I understand what different ones do and what the different knobs do. But for a long time, I did not, and just was like, this makes it sound louder and better when it doesn't, and that's what it does for me. I'm a simple man.
Admittedly, I don't know what half the knobs do. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I still don't comprehend threshold and things like that, but I do everything by feel and by what I hear. So I'll turn it up or down based on what I'm feeling or hearing. But ask me for the science of that.
I can't get into the science. I know what it does. I when I say I know what it does, it means I know what it does to my signal.
Okay.
Not the science. That's the physics of it. That's something that is for better minds than my own. But yeah, so my first compressor that I got into, let's get into our own gear and kind of our experience. I will say I've owned only 2 models, but I've tried a bunch of different ones, and some of those borrowed from you, some of those borrowed from friends, some of them I even bought and returned. But I had a Dynacomp for a really long time.
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic. And honestly, it still sounds good. Like I have actually, even last week was actually playing with one. And just the simple 2 knobs, the output and sensitivity. The way I always moved it is I kind of had them facing each other, of the output up and the sensitivity down. Because I wasn't like really big on that like long sustain you get out of it as you turn sensitivity up, just the way I play. Yeah. But I had that pedal for like the beginning of my pedalboard building career, and then I got it JHS modded.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't even remember what that mod was, but I remember liking what it did. And do you remember when JHS like just strictly modded pedals? Like that was like a big thing they did. Like they sold their own.
That was back in the day.
Yeah, they'd also you could do custom artwork with them too, where you could send your pedal and have them rehouse it. It's funny that that was like their origins. That's how I found out about them. It's crazy that they just build like so many of their own pedals now. But so yeah, the Dynacomp was my first, and then I bought the first run of the limited edition Deep 6 compressor from Walrus Audio. And actually I bought it, I think it was a Black Friday, the one I have with the anglerfish on it originally.
I love their Black Friday stuff.
Yes, it's always cool. And what happened was it actually glitched out the website. So I put my credit card info in and I thought I bought one, but then it didn't go through, but I still got charged. So I actually at the time contacted Brady, who was their owner at the time, who now is Old Blood Noise. And I was like, hey man, I'm cool with a refund. Like I tried to buy this, I guess it's out. And he actually sent me one that was a serial number above the 10 they released.
Oh, wow.
So mine has, I think it's 11 out of 10 is mine.
So you've basically pissed off all other 10 people who thought they only had 1 of 10. Now they have 1 of 11.
Well, I mean, that was like over a decade ago, so it's fine to say it on this podcast. I also got a t-shirt.
But they may be listening. They might be listening.
To be fair, they might be. Very cool. I actually got that pedal, and as I said before, that I landed there. I figured out I like that like 1176 universal audio compressor, which is why I wanted to buy that one. Because I figured it out in plugin world of like using plugins of that. And I just liked that pedal offered that in a stomp box, but with like 4 knobs. I didn't have like a million knobs to change, and it was just kind of like a lot of the magic happened in the way they built the pedal. Yeah. And I have had that pedal since. I recently, last year, had to get it repaired by Walrus, and I think they actually put a new board in it because something went wrong. Okay. But it's good as new, and it works with all my guitars, and I don't really have to change the settings a lot, and that is the perfect compressor for me.
Dude, that's awesome. That's actually kind of hard because, like, I mean, guitar-wise, I mean, you have a Strat, you have a Tele, you have an SG.
Yes.
You have a Jazz, right?
Yeah, Jazzmaster as well. And I've had like various other humbucker guitars and semi-hollows, and that was why I liked it so much is I will jimmy with like the output, and that's about it. Because I've kind of found like the settings for the way I play, and that to me is the ideal compressor pedal, where it just kind of does its job without minimal tweaking. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. That is actually something like that is a gem to find in a pedal of any kind. I mean, especially like drive chain. I mean, when we start getting into delays and reverb and other modulation things, there's no one size fits all, but to be able to do that with a compressor, especially like, again, knowing like the science of it being that it's adjusting the gain, volume, whatever, but knowing that all of those different guitars in those different pickup configurations send different amounts of volume, to know that you're like using just one setting is pretty rad.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because I feel like you've listened to many recordings of me playing guitar, and they all kind of sound similar texture-wise. Obviously, guitar pedals, etc., change it. But yeah, that compressor has kind of been, as I'm looking over at my board right now where we're recording, I think that's been the most consistent pedal on my board for like the better part of the time I've owned it, because everything else has been changed out or replaced or moved off and replaced. So you did tempt me recently, actually, where you got one of those Origin Effects Cali 76, which is basically the same circuit that this pedal is built on with more knobs and really, really, really high-end components. And I did really like that, but one of the reasons I passed on it and was like, I don't need to, I'm going to stick with tried and true, is there was too many knobs. 6 knobs. I need 4. I don't need 6. I was like, I found myself dialing in more than I was playing with it. And that's always where I'm like, okay, this is a pedal that it's functionally a utility pedal. Obviously there is some tone shaping. And I didn't want to be spending my time tweaking my compressor. I was like, let's just get back to playing with the thing I like. It's the same type of circuit. Yes, it sounded magnificent. But I was like, I'm gonna stick with tried and true here. Absolutely. So let's go through your compressor journey, since mine's kind of boring. I just kind of got the things I liked and stayed with them.
Okay, so I don't have these all written out, so we're just gonna go off memory here. I tried the Dynacomp, and I tried a couple of variations. Like I tried some of like the Analog Man stuff, and some of the Dan Armstrong based like Orange Squeezer type stuff, and I never liked them. And I always thought then like, oh, I'm not a compressor person. But, as someone with, gear acquisition syndrome, I was determined to find one that I would like, because I had to have one, right? I needed one. Then I got the Barber Tone Press, the big box version. And that really solidified to me what I want out of a compressor. And it's kind of like the most anti thing. It's not, because a lot of them have it, but it's having a blend knob. And I think your Deep 6 has a blend knob. Am I right?
You are correct. It does have a blend knob. Yes.
Okay. So, real quick, what a blend knob does is it brings your unaffected dry tone back into the output. So you'll have essentially, your output will be both the compressed sound and then also an uncompressed sound. So it's basically, it copies the signal and then brings it back together, one compressed, one not compressed. And then the blend knob basically is how much. Like think of it as a mix. If you think of it wet dry, where if you put all the way, no, don't think of it as a mix. Basically, it's how much of the dry tone do you want. So if it's all the way off, there's no dry tone. And if it's all the way on, it's like a 50-50 mix, like all dry tone plus all the compression.
Yep.
But the reason why that type of compressor is what basically sank in for me is how I was using it, how I was playing. I got that right as I was, doing a lot of praise and worship stuff, as well as my own band stuff. And where I was coming in is I wanted that bell-like chime. I wanted to hear the Radiohead type sounds and Hillsong United type sounds. Those are completely opposite spectrums in terms of music. Some people might be going, wait, what's that? But I wanted that bell, and with a unblended compressor, I didn't get it. It was just kind of like this country squish, and I did not like that. But when I was able to roll in the dry tone, it still had all of those pick dynamics and the harmonics of how I was playing.
Yeah,
but it was able to bring up those low, like the quieter moments to a louder level. And it really just rounded out that sound. And I use it in more quiet moments. I'm not using it in loud moments. I'm using it when it's in the softer times. So for me, it has to have a blend knob. And so knowing that, I think there was a moment where I decided I didn't need it anymore. So I, sold or traded that V1 big box tone press. And when I kind of came back into it, I checked out the JHS, what is it, Tidy Whitey?
The little tiny, they're like
the little mini,
finger style one,
Yep, the small finger style. The Cali 76, like you said, I tried that. I've tried the Deep 6 that you have. I also tried their recently discontinued Mira.
I forgot they had that compressor.
They did. And I know why they discontinued it, but I'm not going to share that because that'll have to be part of a future thing. But that was like the Mira. It's like I believe it was like an optical. It had like side chain, like you could plug in, like if you wanted like a more percussive instrument to bring in some side chain compression. Like it had all of that available. And in a regular sized box, it was fantastic. And I was pretty set on that. I honestly was. And then my partner, as a gift, got me the Barber Tone Press 2, like their mini, like smaller footprint. And to kind of honor that as a gift, I chose to keep that one and got rid of the Mira. But the Barber one I really like. It's actually only 3 knobs, and then 2 switches. So it's really simple to control.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And I did actually, I wanted to give the Cali 76 a fair shake against it. And I honestly, for the way that I play, I didn't notice a difference. And I definitely didn't notice a difference for the value difference between those two. So, like I offered you this Cali 76 and then you didn't want it. It didn't do enough for you to kick off the.
Yeah, it was kind of the same thing. I was like, and that's something I think comes into play with, well, I think we could talk about this throughout each pedal is it's both like, does it work with the way you play? And then obviously, does it work with your budget? And do you need to have, $300 budgeted to your compressor?
Right.
Probably not. If you can get the sound out of one that works for you. I have played with the Tone Press, not yours, actually, another friend that has it. And I do like that one. I feel like I could make that switch if I ever needed to in a pinch. The only other compressor that I ever kept, and this is one I mentioned earlier, I returned, was have you ever used the Pigtronics Philosopher's Tone?
I've not used it, but I've heard of that. I've heard great things about it.
Really, really cool. I had one of I think it was, this was actually back when I took over some of the guitar playing for you with Chuck.
Okay, yeah.
I had one version of that, and two parts about it are annoying. One, it was like a rectangle shaped pedal on a board that didn't really love that.
Oh,
and
right.
It required 12 to 18 volts of
Okay,
power.
hold on, back up a sec. Most of our pedals are rectangle shaped, so specify a little bit more what you mean.
The landscape mode instead of vertical mode. That's a really good point. Yes, and it was like it was a weird shape. It sounded really cool, but it had to have its own wall wart at the time because I didn't have a pedalboard that's a pedal power supply that supported 12 to 18 and I ended up returning it. Like I bought it and returned it to Guitar Center at the time because I was like, oh, this is cool, but also it's like a $200 compressor. I'll stick with my Dynacomp at the time. But yeah, other than that, I've basically been happy. I guess something we should talk about here, because we sort of skipped into just talking about compressors and what they are and what we've used, is where is it in your signal chain? For me, it's up front.
Yeah.
It's the first thing first thing I plug my guitar into.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do it the exact same way. Because again, if you think about what is coming into your compressor gets squished down, and then what's coming out is getting amplified. Anything that is in before that compressor, like an overdrive, distortion, delay, reverb, whatever it is that's in before it, is going to be squished. Just again, by the nature of how that compressor works. So if, think about a reverb that trails off really slowly. It's going to you're not going to get the dynamics. It's going to be squished right away, but because it gets louder, that trail is going to not be as gentle of a slope. It's going to stay a little bit bigger. So in some ways, like putting a compressor, just like putting anything else within your signal chain, really affects the output. It affects what you're getting. And yeah, there are other places to put it. And again, like if you're wanting that, that's a great place to do it. But for me, just like you, it's right at the beginning. It's the very first thing.
Yeah, I've never actually tried it many other places. Like I think when I first got into it, but because I know there are some people that put it like at the end of their chain for that like more studio sound. If I'm recording, I just use a compressor plugin at the end of my chain. Like after everything goes in, I'm like, okay, now we're gonna compress it because we need it to fit in the mix and not. I want some of those reverb trails tightened up and not to just wash over the rest of everything else I'm doing.
Right. Yeah, I guess for me, like I have the hologram effects chroma console at the end of my chain, and that has a compressor in there as well. So if I really need that at the end, that would be what comes in.
Is that the sweeten on there? The yellow?
No, it's the squish or squash.
Oh,
it's on the texture
the end
side.
compressor. Okay.
Yeah.
I have that sitting on my desk because I use it more as synthesizers than I do with guitars. But I have also used it as an end of chain of like, ooh, let's throw something after my amp that I want to have.
Oh yeah.
Which is cool for. But
the only thing that I'll put before my compressor is I've got a 29 pedals Una, which is kind of like it's like an elite Unity amplifier. So in some ways, it kind of is. Oh man, if I say this out loud, people are going to like throw darts at me. Again, it's something of a compressor because it is like a Unity amplifier, and compressors are limiting amplifiers in ways. So I have that, so that goes into my compressor, but then beyond that, it's nothing else goes in front.
Yeah, I guess we can kind of piggyback at the end of this episode. None of us, you use that. Neither of us really use many other utility pedals in our setups. Like I don't have an EQ in my pedalboard. I never really have. I've never used a noise limiter just because both of us playing kind of shoegazy sounds. I don't feel like I need a noise limiter ever. It would be
we want
weird.
that noise. We're trying to make that noise.
I want the wall of noise where everything is just like so chaotic and crazy. So yeah, I'm also. I know you love that thing. I often think about a lot of utility pedals, especially high price tag ones like the Una, where I'm like, I'm sure it does what it says it does. But to me, it's also one of those things where if you can't quite explain what it does, and when I listen to it with or without it, I don't totally hear the difference. I start to wonder if it's in my own head.
Sure.
And I feel like there's a lot of now I know the Una. I can actually say from listening to your signal path with and without it, it definitely does some sweetening in a pretty way.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's one of those things where there's a lot of utility type effects pedals that I feel like are like mumbo jumbo, where you don't actually need them, and you could just move knobs on your other pedals and achieve the same thing. But that's also a thing that might get me crucified for saying it on this podcast.
Well, I think let's ask ourselves, like if you look at your pedalboard, how many pedals in your chain have a tone knob?
I think all of them.
Right. So a tone knob is essentially an EQ.
Does the Mood have a tone knob?
I have it right in front of me.
No, it doesn't. I can't see that far.
Well, if you want to get not technical, I guess you could consider the clock knob to be a tone, because the higher up it is, the brighter it is. And
lo-fi, hi-fi, dark light. Yeah, it kind of does. So
but we're getting way off compressors right now.
Yeah, well, but we're tagging utility pedals into here because some people use them early in the chain, and you brought the Una up.
That's true. I did. It's my fault.
It's your fault. We went off topic, but it's fine. I think utility pedals are something that, I guess a volume pedal is. I do use a volume pedal in the middle of my chain. I do
use that too. Yeah. In the middle.
So I have
that's right. You do.
I have my volume pedal set up as it does two things. It's a mute section for my drive and modulation.
Okay.
So it mutes everything, and then it swells all of those into my time-based effects.
Okay.
So it's the middle of my chain, so it can work to sort of like keep things moving. And also, I'll sometimes, especially if I'm like messing around with like writing and it's just me, I will create a loop on my looper, which is at the end of my chain in my HX stomp, and then I'll turn my volume pedal down, and it keeps everything going after that, obviously, so you can still hear the loop. And then I'll switch another guitar in to layer something into my looper. So having it as like kind of a mute for the early section of my board has always been really nice to me.
Yeah.
I know some folks just put it right up front. I like the ability to swell in my drive and modulation section. I've always liked that.
Yeah.
Especially if you have like a ton of gain on, it's cool to bring that into like a really washy reverb. So that's why I've always had it set up that way.
No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I always have my volume at the very beginning, and I use it as a master mute, and then also for swells. But there have been those moments when I've had a higher gain going on, and it's not as smooth of a sweep putting the volume at the beginning because it, because as soon as it hits
it's all on, all off.
Gain, it just right.
Yeah, which is why I've always done it the way I do. I feel like I read that on like a blog like in 2011, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a cool idea." And then I just liked the way it worked with how I play, and I just left it there.
That, or it was a James Duke thing, and you just copied it. I don't know.
It may have been his blog. It may have been his blog. I used to follow his blog back in the day. I don't actually know if he still even posts there, but
I don't know. He'll post on Instagram sometimes, just random, like what he's playing. But anyway, hey, as we wrap up, I have a question for you, sir. And I'll ask you the question, and I will also answer it. And if you don't know, I can answer it right away. But you're set on your Deep Six. I'm set on my Tone Press. But if you had to go out and grab another compressor that you wanted to try,
ooh, I like this question.
What would you grab?
Okay, so I'm gonna go. There's gonna be two answers. The one is a silly one, which is I would actually like to try the Deep Six V3 because I haven't. Just the newer one of the.
Oh, you're on the 2?
I'm on the 1.
Oh,
I'm on the
wow.
1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't. The 2 didn't do enough for me to justify jumping. The 3 kind of makes me want to.
Okay.
Just because they added. Now I did say this earlier, but they did add a knob. Honestly, as far as other ones that I haven't played at all or messed around with, because I've messed around with a lot of pedals, like just at shops or borrowing them, as I've said. I have been curious to try actually it's the UA one, but not the big box UA one, the one that's just literally the UAFX 1176 studio.
The 1176, yeah.
One, because as we just discussed, that is the circuit we like. I also like that they do have that kind of more affordable UA series now. That's not the $400 price point.
Right.
And I'm just intrigued by that pedal format because I love the plug-in UA of the 1176. I use it on a lot of things.
Okay.
And I saw they also found a way to build to the back of that pedal a parallel compressor off on and a buffer bypass off on. So true bypass or buffer bypass. And just kind of those additional settings of things. I was like, ooh, okay, that seems like an interesting. So you have single, dual, and sustain on that for compressor as like a dip switch in the middle. Cool. And then you have your input, output, attack, release ratio as well. And
wow.
My first UA pedal was that the Dream 65.
Yes.
And I really like it. And I've been kind of wanting to try, I've messed around with like their delay and their reverb. I wasn't really super impressed by the pedal, but the UA 1176 compressor is something I want to try.
Okay.
How about you?
So actually I want to try the big box UA. I want to try their Max.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's the one that's the same size as the Dream, right?
Yes, it's really big. And I say that even though it doesn't really have a blend, going on with it, but
it's a stereo compressor and that's why you want it.
Well, no, I want it because it's a dual compressor and they're independently turned on and off. I think the Cali 76 stacked is like I could be wrong. Is like it's 2 compressors, but they're like always on unless you're turning one off like via knob. But the Max has a switch for comp 1 and a switch for comp 2.
And they're different models, right? You can do different models.
Yes,
you can do with the other ones. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So you can do the 1176. You can do Dynacomp, you can do Opto, you can do the a FET 1176. And by the Opto, I mean like it's the LA2A, which is another classic studio type compressor. So you can choose any of those 3 for either of the comps. So you know what I mean? Like you can do one as a Dyna and one as an 1176, or you could do them both 1176s at different levels. And you can also kind of choose I guess how they go, like what's the
order of it. That's
yes. Thank you. But yes, when I flipped around to the back of that pedal, it is stereo. And I love stereo stuff.
Yeah.
And
that's why I saw what was happening right away. I was like, oh, it's a stereo compressor. He'd love that. He could go stereo all the way.
I could completely, that would make me, oh man, now I have to get it. I could go stereo all the way. Because I have a stereo overdrive pedal, which we'll do
Next
we'll
week is
more,
drive distortion fuzz.
Okay.
Which you don't use fuzz, but we'll get into that.
Oh, I do have a fuzz that I like, and we'll get into that.
All right, we'll get into that next week. But yeah, I like that question. I also now feel like we both need to try the universal audio ones, and maybe after we get through our series of our board signal paths, review them both and see how we feel.
Cool.
But yeah, so that's compressors. I'm sure there's much more. And, as we sort of alluded to with the podcast, this is going to grow and evolve. And we're starting out just walking through a signal chain. So it gives us a framework. But we'll probably talk about compressors more because more will be released. We'll review things. We'll check them out. You'll see videos on the YouTube channel, etc.
Absolutely.
Anything else on compressors before we say goodbye for this week?
No, I think that's it. I was actually originally thinking like, are we going to be able to fill a whole episode about compressors? But this is a longer one.
Yes, of course we are. But well, yes, thank you all for listening, and stay tuned. Next week we'll be doing drive fuzz distortion. Oh man, that's going to be good. That's going to have to be a multi-episode too. Yeah, probably. But all right, have a good one all. All right, see you, everybody.